Hello, I'm Jerry and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, this is where I focus on loose, impressionistic watercolour and the decisions that actually make a painting work. Composition, value and clear shape design. Each week I share demonstrations and practical explanations aimed at helping you understand why a painting holds together, not just how to copy one. If you want to build confidence in your choices and create stronger, simpler landscapes, you'll find plenty here. For today's lesson, I put the outline drawing on my website. I made it more detailed than I usually would, just to help you place things accurately if you're painting along. But even with that detail, the entire scene is built on three main shapes. Those shapes are the foundation of the composition. The first is the sky, one clear light shape that sets the overall tone. The second is the land, everything solid in the scene, grouped into a single middle value mass. And the third is the water or foreground, the darker shape that anchors the painting and directs the eye. Once you understand where those three shapes sit, the composition becomes straightforward. So in this demo, I'll show you how to organise them quickly and decisively, and how that structure supports the rest of the painting. So let's begin. Right, first I'm going to start where I normally start with the sky. And with this guy, I'm going to be actually doing it in lavender. This is quite a nice colour to do the sky in. Just one wash. I'm using a Tintorella or Tintoretto size 9 mop, which has got quite a nice point on it. Lots of water. Putting in some cloud shapes. Leaving some white paper in the centre, and I'm going to be going straight over where the trees are on the right hand side. This is going to dry nice and light. And then moving quickly on with the same brush with a little bit of cerulean blue and cobalt turquoise. Once again, quite a lot of water. I'm going to try and do as much of the painting as I can without stopping to dry things off. Working my way down from the top. I'm using £140 rough paper, Saunders Waterford, and I've got the board slightly tilted, so when I put the washes on, water runs down just a little. Leave me some gaps to come down. Confident brush strokes. Putting in just a tiny little bit of cadmium yellow, which is quite a strong colour, just to vary the tone as it's coming into the shore, which is going to be reflecting more of the beach and the house there. I'm leaving an area by the boat there, which is going to be the reflection of the white of the building. I've marked it out in pencil. I'll stop just short of the edges so I can rub those out. Just adding more of the yellow as I get closer to the beach. As you can see, I've covered quite a lot of the paper already, and still now thinking about where I can go that's not touching the wet paint. Now this is raw sienna. Not too worried about it touching the wet paint at the top, because that's going to be quite dark. That's going to be the shadow of the trees. Just putting an impression of the roof, of the red roof tiles, with leaving some white, which is going to be the light shining on it, bright light shining on it. Most of my paints are Winsor Newton. I do have some Jackson's own brand, which I quite like. Artist quality. French ultramarine. Carefully putting in this boat, not touching the wet paint. This is one of the focal points, and it's going to be leading you into the painting. A couple of buoys on the side there, so just leaving that white paper. Be doing those much later. Cadmium red, nice strong colour. We'll dry a little bit lighter. Putting in the second boat. You can see with the composition here that everything's connected right across the paper. On the left, I'll be putting in a seawall, which will connect to the mast of the blue boat there, and then carrying on with the seawall and the houses and the trees in the background. Putting on a light grey wash there, and I thought it was too dark, so I've put some clean tissue over it, taking some of the colour off. Raw umber. The brush I'm using is an Escoda Perla, size 8. So fairly small brush. This is the first wash for the seawall. Still haven't done any drying yet, so my plan is working out quite well. Mindful of where the light's coming from as well, left to right, which will be important when I start putting the shadow areas in. And a much more watery wash into the right hand side, which is in the light. Back into cobalt turquoise, and at the back of the houses there's some sheds, which I'm not going to make too much of. Just losing those with a wash, and I'll put some marks on them later on. Giving the front of the buildings the same treatment as I gave the roof there, and just putting some colour in and leaving some white, which is going to be the glare of the sun. Still using the size 8 brush. Just dipping into the blues on the palette there to start putting in a first wash of shadow colour on the right hand side of the building. Just varying it a little bit. Just dipped into blue there. French ultramarine, I think it was. Now I've dried that, and going over with a putty rubber, the white area where I'd put some lines in. Decided I'll just put the lines in freehand when I come to separate the white area a little bit. Always leave this part to it's perfectly dry, otherwise you'll smudge the watercolour paper. Sometimes you can't get the marks out. Putting in the distant trees. Quite a heavy wash of cobalt turquoise. This colour does dry quite a bit lighter. Nice cool colour. When that dries, that will set right back in the distance. Cool colours recede, warm, come forward. Working quite quickly, but making sure I'm accurate, leaving some white lines, which will be waves breaking, that kind of thing, in the distance. And now starting to put in the first wash on what's going to be the massive trees at the back of the house. Size 12 Escoda. French ultramarine. Cadmium yellow. And a little bit of hooker's green. See, I'm making use of the pools of paint on this palette that are left there. There's a little bit of raw sienna. Putting a bit of yellow into the mix. And carefully going around these roof areas. Cerulean blue. Raw sienna. Get some darks in. And we'll be going over all this again. And carefully going around these roofs of these couple of buildings. It's making it interesting by varying the tones. And remembering that the sun's coming from the left to the right. So that's where it's going to be lightest with this tree mess. I'm just doing some flicks here and giving the impression of branches and broken areas where the tops of the trees are. I've done the pencil marks quite thick using a 2B pencil so that you can see the marks if you can attempt to do this yourself, which I hope you do. Just bringing that down to the path by the harbour wall. Making that tree mass warm to the left and cool to the right. Back into the raw umber, smaller brush, size 8. This is the side of the seawall that's in the shade. It's varying it a little bit. Burnt sienna going into the raw umber here and there. Notice when I paint that I don't go back over what I've just painted very often. Makes the painting look fresher. Putting in some marks with this brown colour of seaweed and maybe ropes or something coming down to the water's edge. Still using a larger brush, doing the boat in the foreground. Got quite a nice point on it. Makes it easy to do fine work and not have to keep switching brushes. And there's the top of that boat. That's at the top of the white reflection. It's going to look quite effective when I come back to that. That's the mop that I was using, putting some paint onto that, cobalt turquoise, and then a smaller brush, size 8, into raw sienna, just doing the coastline, and then putting the mop on, loaded with paint. Lots of paint on it. It holds quite a lot of paint. It's fun to use. And then bringing the colour of the sea down towards the lower part of the painting. This is where things will start taking shape and stop looking so flat as they do when you just put one wash on everything. These are the middle tones. Mixing it up a little bit, leaving a few breaks, give the appearance of some movement in that sea. Still working from top to bottom. Now I'm going to break up this white area there, just a little, putting some lines across it. Just a little bit of movement in this sea. The waves are just barely touching the shoreline. Darkening it up now around these boats to make the shape of the boat spring out. Paint's grey, nice and dark. Seawall on the left. Just leaving some white paper there, which is going to be the impression of a couple of boats tied up to the front of it. Nice dark colour. Only do one wash of that. Looking at where else I can start putting in some darks at this stage, bearing in mind the paint's still wet with the water. Don't want that to run down too much. Never get tired of painting these kind of scenes, and the composition here is really good. Everything connected. Boats on the right, seawall. Boats on the left, small seawall. All taking up that middle part of the painting. Just making this shadow area a bit darker now with the right hand side of the building. Bearing the shadow here as well, putting in some warm tones with the darks. Makes it more interesting rather than just a flat dark wall. Shadows aren't always just one tone. Looking at where the other shadows need to be. Light's coming from the left, so the shadows are to the right. Still using quite a small brush, size 6. And this is the imperfections on this seawall. Keeping the right hand side light where the sun's shining on it. Just dried it off there. Payne's grey and sap green. What was that? Hooker's green. Not too much hooker's green. Quite a powerful colour. I'm just working along the edges of the building here, silhouetting them with some real darks. I won't want a hard edge of this dark colour here, so I'll work my way along the edge with the very darks, and then I'll dilute that edge with some more watery paint and vary the colours, make it more interesting. Real dark shade's going to be quite close to the rooftops. Working quite fast. I want this edge to stay wet. No hard edges. Raw sienna, hooker's green. A bit thick. Going to put some water in with that. Now merging that into that dark colour, losing that hard edge. Notice how I'm using the brush quite often on its side, and then returning to use the point to put some broken foliage in. Just blending that dark into that lighter colour. Remember to leave white holes in your foliage, bird holes when the birds fly through. Just looking around and varying the tones and amongst these trees. But get some real nice darks in the area at the back of the house. Going around the chimney pot. French ultramarine, cerulean, making this quite a cool area. At the back here, deep shade. Just using quite a small brush, size 8. And then just going around putting in some touch of darks, touch of dark paint here and there. This will dry out lighter, merge in better. And now going back over this shadow area on that house, darkening that right up. Real shade, deep shade. Makes the non-shadow parts pop out more. Look like intense sunshines on them. Raw umber, a bit of Payne's grey, darkening up this left-hand side of the seawall. And then just put a little bit of watery paint, blending it, wet in wet. Neutral tint. This is a size 2 rigger brush. A Skoda Ultimo. I'll be putting in quite a bit of detail with this. Soffits, windows, roof lines. A few marks on this roof on this near side house. This will really start to strengthen things when you put the darks in. Just an impression of some imperfections on the walls, bricks, that kind of thing. And putting in doors, windows, all with this neutral tint mixture, quite thick. Nice long point on this brush. It's where things will start to come to life. Cover up these pencil marks. You can see that nice contrast there with the dark trees against the light roofs, light against dark, dark against light. Very effective. Just putting in some masts. I pencil these in quite hard so they're quite easy to follow. But always do these freehand. Don't try using a ruler or anything like that. It really shows. It doesn't matter if it's slightly imperfect, as long as they're all like that. If you do a pencil mark first, and just use that as a guide, but make sure you cover it up. And these are just very thin ropes going up, not doing the whole thing, just an impression, as is this impression of a couple of boats, which is nothing more than a couple of marks. I'll be putting a bit of colour on there later. Putting in some outlines, outlining this boat. Where the masts are, there's reflections. Just do a broken line. A little bit of movement in the water there, making those lines move around a bit, and then I'm putting in some black marks just so you can see the ripples or the small waves in this water, but just giving a feeling of just a little bit of movement. Everything isn't static. And the shapes that I was mentioning at the start of the painting are obvious now. That's the sky, the water, and the buildings, and the boats connected to the buildings. Left a white area there, which is going to be the sun reflecting on the path. A couple of dots, could be people, things left on the road. Putting in quite a few marks with this neutral tint, but not overdoing it. And now just adding some colour to this front wall of this building. It looks like some intense lights shining on it. raw umber, quick wash over this right hand side just to blend in some of those black marks, keeping it lighter than the left hand side where it's in shadow. And now just going around kind of tidying things up. Another wash of that cadmium red on there. Toning down the left hand side with the light shining. And its reflection being lighter. When you do reflections, you find that the darks become lighter and the lights become darker as a rule. I'm putting some blue in there. Reflection of that near boat. And decided that needed another quick wash over that French ultramarine. And there's another boat there, which I'm not going to make too much of. Just put it in a kind of a grey colour. As I said, I'm just going around slowly tidying things up, putting a little bit of colour on these distant boats. It can take quite a while sometimes, just finishing off these paintings with quite a bit of detail in. We find it can take as long to do some of the small parts as what it does big areas like the trees, the sky, or the sea. Important to try and keep the boat shapes accurate. Just going around with a bigger brush again, putting in some dark paint, some reflections, buildings. Now this is white gouache on a rigger brush. I decided not to leave the white, but just to bring in a few white areas, masts, and some chinks of light here and there with this, to faster way of working. Quite a strong mixture. I only want to go over once with this. Putting in some rails on the boats and covering up that pencil mark with some white. When that dries out, you actually see the white. It's kind of disappeared with the light on it. And then there's some white reflections. I need a little bit of restraint with this. It's quite easy to get carried away. Put too many marks in. Oh, that's too big. That I'll correct that in a minute. Just putting a few ripples there against the seawall and some sunlight reflecting on these boats in the distance. I'm just using a bit of this green mixture to lose the top of that mask that I went into thick with. Putting some colour over it and smudge it a bit, and I'll just lose it in that tree mess there. That's where your finger comes in handy. Couple of boys there. Put them in different colours. As you can see, that blue boat there leads you into the painting. Pop a signature on. And removing the masking tape. Carefully pulling it away from the painting so as not to tear the surface of the paper. Although I only put it on quite recently, so it's not stuck too hard, and there we are. Hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll come and paint or watch me paint again. See you again soon. Bye bye.